Welcome in. You are listening to another episode of keepthechange.co.nz's 30 and 30, up to day number 26. It's the 26th of March today. Slowly getting towards the end of the financial year. What a great time it is for accountants. Gee, we love it. Gets exciting. It's tax time, baby. I'm sure you're fired up as well. Nut. I'm a little bit fired up, though, actually, because I just recorded a rant very quickly on my Instagram before, for Keep the Change, before hitting record on this, and I basically, maybe I'll see if I can play it through here. It might come through.
Fuck average. Seriously, you can't be a fucking average rugby player and expect to play for the All Blacks. You can't be just an average person and expect to have an above average salary. If that's the path you want to go down, but for me, I knew I could chase my potential. It was my responsibility and my responsibility only. So that's exactly what I did. So to reiterate, fuck average. Bin that if that's not who you want to be. Let go of all that shit and get after it and become the best version of yourself you can be. Bam.
Wow, there you go, mate. You need to calm down. Okay, Luke, yeah, good stuff. I was just having a few carbs and a bit of chicken there as well. Probably lose about 1,000 followers after watching that. But does that really matter? No, it doesn't. But it's very true. And this is kind of after someone saying, "Oh, this content's not for the average New Zealander," effectively, or whatever. But it's kind of something I've been thinking about. I'm like, yeah, as this journey for these 30 and 30s has gone on, of course it's becoming harder for people to relate to it because they're probably not at these chapters yet, but that's completely fine. You're on your journey and I'm on mine. But, don't give up and don't quit on your dreams. And it's interesting how people can look at some areas of life and go, well, that's... The average Kiwi couldn't save 40% of their income. Yeah, the average Kiwi couldn't fucking play for the All Blacks either. Okay? But some people do. So how are they doing it? And that's what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to study those types of things. And if you want to achieve more than you've ever achieved before, you've got to be willing to do things that you've never done before. And that was the same for me. And I had to understand that. And I was scared as shit. And I've had to make phone calls I didn't want to. I've had to say things I didn't want to. I've had to be quiet when I just want to talk. And I've had to be in awkwardness. And I've just had to grow into a different person that I wasn't when I started. But that's the beauty of going on a journey, right? As you learn. And it's just like running a marathon or getting into the gym and stuff. You're completely different by the end of it. And to just hold on to this kind of average thing, then you don't want to be doing that. You want to be figuring out what your potential is and going after that. But anyway, that's just how I think. But if you want average, okay, here you go. Like, don't buy that coffee tomorrow. Walk to work. Why don't you just walk to work 3 times a week and then you'll be able to save a little bit more and just, hey, maybe increase your KiwiSaver by 1%. Like, the thing is that everyone's going to do the average, aren't they? So you're just going to be like them. But I'd imagine there's a lot of people that are listening to this who don't want to be average. They want to go beyond that. And this is what some of these lessons are about, is what the fuck do we actually need to do to ensure that we can go beyond the average? Because there's plenty of people out there giving you advice around all the lazy, boring shit, all the simple stuff isn't there. So what I've tried to do is dig deeper into some of the things that I've learned that can actually help you and get you thinking and challenge your thinking. And there's a great response to the kind of average chat today on Instagram. Someone was like, when I first started listening to this content, I was like, this isn't for me. And then by the end of it, they were like, how can I make this for me? How can I make this work for myself? And that is mint. That encourages me to want to do more of these. And this is why I'm sitting here at 5:30 on a Wednesday. I feel like I'm talking faster now because I'm working to a deadline, because I know that this one could be a bit longer. And my girlfriend is going to pick me up at 6:05. So in my head, I'm like, I need to have these all downloaded and loaded up into the Google folder and done. And I need to walk out of here at 6:05 to keep her happy as well. So a little lesson there too. When you're at work, work when you're at work, especially if you've got kids and stuff like that, something that I get taught and got taught, it is, treat the hours that you're at work with the respect that they deserve, because you're taking them away from another area of your life that you could be spending them in. And that leads us into a very, very interesting topic today. I don't even know what to title this one. I don't even think I wrote down a title before I started, but this is about my stepdad passing away. And he left us very suddenly. He had a heart attack, and it was a massive fright, or a massive shock to all of us. And it was just, I'm sure if you've lost anyone close to you, you just have that feeling of kind of like, what the fuck? And it can challenge all the ways you think. And I want to sort of explain a couple of those things and see, where my thinking might have gone from there, or maybe even relate to some of the people out there that may have been into a similar situation. But he wasn't supposed to die. I'm sure we probably all feel like that, and I still feel ripped off for him, and I probably feel like a bit emotional as I say that, because I just feel really gutted for him that he missed out on so much of what he still had ahead of him. But that is the game of life, isn't it? Now, the reason I say that is because I've been very lucky. I've had 2 sets of parents, so I've had 4 times the input. 2 times the input, because I've had basically 2 sets of parents, right? So most people, I don't know, probably not most people these days, but if you've just had mother and father along the way, then you're getting input from 2 people. But I've been very lucky to be able to call on information and opinions and thinking from 4 different people. And I probably thought in an older version of myself, like, oh, poor me. But now I've realised that it's probably actually really helped me, because it's allowed me to see things from a number of different angles. But anyway, him and my mother were going to they're getting to that stage of their life where they're like, we're going to go out there and we're going to be living our life and living in our camper van and just cruising around the country, and we'll just make a buck along the way on the road. And us kids are a bit like, fuck, what are you going to do with the house? And like, okay, sure, like, just go out there and do it and bloody see how you go, see if you like it, you might as well give it a crack. And they were kind of getting to that stage, and then he died just as they were thinking about doing that. And so I guess that's kind of the first point, is then it pulls you back to that classic thinking of like, well, you've got to balance your life, and like, what's the point of working so hard, and you want to live, and all of those things. And so it made me really think about that, and I thought, wow, he's worked his whole life to then kind of be able to go out and live and do some of the things that he wanted to do. Not that he hadn't done some of those things throughout it, but they were getting really excited for a new chapter of their life, and then it got taken away from them. So that was obviously very sad, and it makes you just remember to live your life while you can. So sometimes I will splash out, or I'll go to the fancy restaurant, or I'll, I've just booked a trip to go overseas, and I've subsidised most of my mate's fee for that, because he's a policeman, and he's been through a lot of shit recently, and I'm like, mate, I want to be able to pay for some of your fee, your flights and all that sort of stuff. And part of it's like, well, should I really do that, Luke? You could be investing that money, whatever. It's like, fuck up, just get it done. Life is also for living at the same time too. So we've got to be able to balance those things. But I think balance is one of those things where we could talk about that for 2 or 3 hours and not actually get to a conclusion on what balance actually is. But I think about it as like, what does it mean for you, and can you figure out what balance means for you? I really like working, and I really like the fact that I'm here at 5:30 on a Wednesday recording these. For some people, they would be like, mate, you're an absolute lid, like, what are you doing? But maybe in 10 years time, I'll be like, fuck, why did I used to do that? I would never do that anymore, or who knows? So you've got to kind of always look at how you are balancing your life, and whether it's what you're doing what you want to be doing. And I think we've talked about it on a previous pod where who was it? It is Mr. Apple. Steve Jobs says that he would ask himself, every morning, well, not every morning, but regularly, if this was one of his last days on Earth, would he want to be doing what he's about to do today? And when the answer was no, too many times in a row, then you're on the wrong path, and you're probably not getting the right sort of balance. So something for us to keep in mind, because we don't know when our time is up, do we? But I guess obviously it was a massive shock for our family, and then you're kind of straight into that mode of sorting everything out and all those different types of things. And I think I spoke about this on a different pod where I went through some things that I'd gone through in my life or worked through. But I was talking to another lad last year, and about losing his dad, and he was just asking me a couple of questions and stuff. And I said, mate, really out of interest, because I haven't asked too many guys this, but when you lost your dad, did you feel like you had because he had a sister and a mother, and that's the same as me, and I've got a brother as well. And I said, did you sort of feel like a new sense of responsibility? And he was nodding his head, and he was like, yep. And I kind of felt it too, because my stepdad had always really looked after and really, really cared and loved my mum and my sister. And he had provided for us for so long, as had my dad as well, and my stepmum, like everybody has for us. But, he really loved those 2 women, and he would really provide for them, and he would give his shirt off his back for them and contribute. And we were very, very lucky. and myself as well, obviously. But they were very close, and he'd just protect them. And I think it's a bit of like a male instinct or intuition or something, and we just want to be like protectors and make sure that we can look after people, and whether that's like innate in us and whether people can relate to that, I hope I'm on the right track with that. But that's kind of what I picked up from him. And I thought, wow, their kind of, their person that was really looking after them is gone. And so you kind of, I think when you lose your dad or a dad, I think you assume or take up part of the responsibility of which you hadn't really been thinking about prior, because you're just like, yeah, it's not my role, I don't really need to worry about that. But all of a sudden it's like, shit, you probably hear people talk about like, you become like the man of the house kind of thing in these stories where people lose their parents early and they become the man of the house and whatnot. And, I'm probably quite lucky that it was later in life for me, and their lives were pretty on track and sorted, and they had other people around them and stuff as well. But it's maybe like a burden almost that comes with that. But for me, I sort of felt that to a degree, but it's driven me to then want to chase my potential further, to then be able to help out should I need to. And I'm not like driven to be like, that's what I have to do, but I would like to be able to do that should they need my help. And there has been times where I've been able to drop everything I'm doing and get on a plane and go and help in different circumstances. And I'm sure there will be times in the future too. I am by no means a perfect brother, a perfect son, and I'm just not a perfect person. But far from it. And I've had to be very probably selfish, to be fair, to achieve some of the things that I've wanted to achieve, because to do those things I've had to cut down on some of the time that I've spent in different areas of my life previously, because my work and my business and stuff has required for me to put in that time to be able to make that stuff happen. But anyway, I want to be able to help them if I'm needed to, but obviously we have to figure out how do we put boundaries around some of those things throughout life as well, because going back to that B word before, well, how do you maintain your balance, your own balance? And we've all got to look after ourselves too. But I'm sure there'll be some people out there that have lost someone in their life and they've felt instant sort of responsibility that they didn't even feel the week before, and they're going like, fuck, okay, now this is sort of on me a little bit. But just be careful not to burden that too much. Now, one of the other things that happened shortly after he passed away is that an insurance advisor got in touch and shared how obviously sorry they were, and said, hey, we need to let you know that your stepfather has life insurance, and we can go through and process that and whatnot. So we had to go through that process. I'd never done that before, but it was obviously a big relief. And I wrote a LinkedIn post about it at the time, because I think the insurance industry, they get smashed, right, where people are just like, it's just shit you don't need, and like, who needs that? But really that money was going to be very significant to my mother. It wasn't a ridiculous, I'll just tell you, it's $100,000, okay? So it's not like, wow, you're set, is it? It's, especially to fast forward to today, from how much money's been printed and what inflation's like, it's not an amount of money where you're like, well, all of your problems are just gone away for the rest of your life. But what it did do is it meant that the debt that they had on their property was able to be cleared, and that was one less thing to worry about. So bless him for thinking of other people. And I would suggest that if you're in a relationship, then you want to be thinking about what insurance you've got over each other, and has someone giving you some advice in that space, especially if you've got debt and you've got kids to look after into the future. I shared that story recently about how someone I went to uni with lost their partner, and it's just tragic to see those types of things, and you really hope that people have support or insurance and things in place. I've had life insurance for a long time, and I don't really have any debt, as we've discussed, but I will at some stage, but I've kept it. And the reason was that I thought, well, if I died, I'd like to sort of leave something behind, because my family have been very supportive of me, so I'd like to sort of repay that support that I've had. But as my life changes and I become a bit more self-sufficient, I probably won't need that life insurance, because there'll be other things left to them anyway. But life insurance was a very good thing for us, and it really helped mum and kind of just eased a little bit of that burden. But, you know, money doesn't solve everything in these situations. It doesn't solve fuck all, to be honest, but it's something, right? And it is a great product, life insurance, for when it's matched with the right types of people and their situation and their debt and things. So I guess the other observation for me was that, you know, my mother, she is like, wow, that's a lot of money. And I'm sitting there going, Mum, like, I don't want to be old practical Luke over here again, but it's not. Like, that's not a lot of money. And I'm sure to some people we think, yes, you know, it is, but it'll quickly go 100 grand. And like I've talked about in different episodes, you know, in the roof's done on the house, okay, well, there's 10 grand of it gone, different things like that. You know, you just don't know what's coming up. So, you know, it was interesting to see her reaction to it, but to think about it from my lens as well, and figure out how she was going to play that out. But anyway, that allowed her to clear the debt on the property. And I was there the day that she got the money, that it actually got processed, and we got to ring the bank, or she got to ring the bank and ask to have the mortgage cleared and the mortgage discharged, I think is the terminology, where the bank don't necessarily have security over the property anymore. So it was it was a very interesting thing to observe, and I'm not entirely sure what the lesson is there, but I would suggest, like I said, if you haven't learned about life insurance before, take some time to learn about that, especially if you're in a relationship, and especially if you're taking out debt and doing those types of things, because we want to look after our loved ones, right? And I guess what it's also spurred me on to do is then go back to my roots. Will You, remember we spoke about Will You, the business that I set up, or tried to set up and then ran from because I was a little bitch and didn't actually carry on with it, where we could go through and put wills together for people. Well, I've had to go through that process myself and look at my own estate planning and think about what I want to happen with any assets that I have. And I'm very fortunate that my partner and I, we're very open and honest with these types of things. And so, you know, she's collected assets in her time prior to me, and I've built some of mine prior to meeting her, and then since meeting her as well. And so we've had discussions about what would have happen, but as we progress in our relationship, then those things would change, and if we have children and things, then everything will change again. But you know, we are actually having some of those very mature conversations, aren't we? And they're not always the funnest or the sexiest or the easiest conversations to have, aren't they? But they are important, and I would just suggest that with that stuff, like, I've gotten better at just trying to stay on the same page as my partner and actually having some of those braver conversations. And hey, again, not a perfect partner, not a perfect relationship person, fucking challenging humans, aren't they? I tell you what, as in I must be challenging for her. But you know, if you can try, and people ask me for advice around like finances and relationships and stuff, and I'm like, well, sorry, like, this just isn't my space, because I don't really know what to say. But clients ask me as well, and the one thing I do say is just like, you know, you need to try and get on the same page. So we're always talking about our goals and being open and honest about them and where we're going, and you know, honesty, and just having those brave conversations, and just sitting down and talking about some of those things has been really, really important. So, you know, think about what you may need to do with a lawyer, for instance, around like setting up wills and estate planning, and protecting those people that maybe will be left behind if you were to pass away, because it just, you know, it is what it is with death. And to go off topic here a little bit, one of the things that I learnt early on in my journey through business and stuff was to get comfortable with death. And it's obviously hard to talk about because it's such an emotional topic, right? But I read a book called Think and Grow Rich, and I would suggest you read this book, Think and Grow Rich. It is one of the best pieces of information I've consumed, and I've gone back and I've listened to it a couple of times. I've probably got pages and pages of notes from when I actually went through it. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was how much people are scared of death, aging, so getting older, and getting sick. And I what it kind of teaches you is that if you can just accept those things and sort of, it shows you some data around when those things actually kind of happen, and how for a lot of people their best years are between their 40s and their 60s, and how much energy you actually have as you carry on, and how important it is to look after yourself, and all these different things that we all kind of know, but it's almost like teaching you to get a little bit more accepting of it. Now, I went and did a skydive once, and I practiced on the way up, sort of like, it was like nervy, and my heart rate would have been up and stuff, but I'd sort of accepted that. People are like, are you nervous? And, I would have been nervous, but I'm like, well, I've been thinking about this, and really, like, if this is how I'm going to die, like, this is how I'm going to die. And that's probably a pretty fucked up thing for people to listen to and think like, wow, that's weird. But hear me out here, because what it's allowed me to do is almost not be as scared of dying in some way. And I'm still, like, I don't want to die, but I know that that's just what ends up happening in a lifetime at some stage. And what I think is that it means that I've learnt to tame my fear a lot more, and it started at that kind of high level, and it's allowed me to decrease it in other areas of my life as well. Don't get me wrong, there are things that I don't like snakes and spiders and shit like that, and getting massive frights, but I've become better in fearful environments, and I feel like it ties back to understanding sort of this, and how much that fear can fuck you up, and so trying to tidy that up. And when COVID hit, we've all seen it. And there'll be people talking about like the fear narrative and stuff from the government and whatnot. But like, let's just ignore the political part of it. So many people have been scared of getting sick, of dying, and then having their freedom taken from them as well, right? And it just all ties back to exactly what's in that book. And that book's like hundreds of years old, and it's just an absolute gem. And I'm sort of rationalizing it at the start, like, hey, look, if I die from this, like, it's going to suck. I'm fucking going to be unlucky, but statistically, I think it's a whatever chance, and, that's going to suck, but it is what it is. But you can't really talk about that, because that's not how a lot of people think. They're the reverse. They're like, we need to protect everyone, and no one should die, and no one should be getting sick, and all these things, and, like, that's all good and well, but it was kind of, with this, we were getting data and information being like, hey, look, it's inevitable that you're going to get this. So I'm like, oh, bugger, okay, well, now that I know it's inevitable, I should just process it, accept it, and try to do what I can to protect myself. But ultimately, what's the biggest risk here is that it takes my life. Well, that sucks. But I feel like I'm pretty out of control of it, beyond the things that I can do to control it. So I've just seen so many people so wound up since COVID regarding dying and getting sick. And it sort of makes all a bit more sense to me now, because it's like we're hardwired to be worried about those things, and they're sort of our biggest fears are dying, getting old, and aging as such, and then getting sick. So once you sort of learn that and accept it, you can try to come to peace with it a little bit more and go like, oh, that's why I feel so weird about that and whatnot, and that's normal. You don't need to defend yourself on Twitter anymore about it and why it's so important. And you can start to remove yourself from all of those kinds of conversations and actually process it for yourself. And you'll save all this time. You'll save all this mental rent where you're thinking about shit you don't need to be thinking about. And you'll start to remove fear from other areas of your life as well. So that's just something that I've kind of learnt a while ago, but then seen play out during COVID and whatnot. And it's all sort of made a bit more sense to me. But I could appreciate that some people just, would not agree with that at all. But if I could suggest you read a piece of literature, it is to go and read Think and Grow Rich and see what you can learn from that. And there are some absolute gems in there. I'm sure you will get a lot out of it. It is quite a tough read because it's quite long. But yeah, it's well worth your time. There we go. That has been day number 26. And sort of focusing on my stepdad dying. This was a few years ago now, so I was sort of halfway through my, my come up from quitting my job through to sort of getting to where I am today. And it's, it's something that I think about, and it's shaped the way that I think about different things every now and then some of the actions that I take in terms of getting some of the things that you don't want to get sorted, like wills and those types of things, and memorandums of understanding and wishes and all these things that these fucking lawyers do, and just like, oh my God, how big's the bill going to get here? But it's all inevitable that we all end up back at a lawyer at some stage being like, hey, how does this all work? So, I think you're sort of better to have your own wishes in place, it's just my opinion, than getting left to sort of what the rules are of what happens with your estate and your assets and things like that should you pass away. I know it's a somber topic, but what did we say the other day? It was death and taxes, right? Two certainties in life. I hope that you've been able to learn something from that, and I really hope that those people who have lost a loved one in their life, that you are coping all right, and it can obviously be a very tough time, and we all process and grieve differently. I'm not an expert in that space, but if you haven't, then maybe get some help. I had a friend lose a family member, and I sort of got to the stage, it's like, mate, like none of us can help you because we're not trained in this space, and I'm not too sure what you're going through because only you do. So go off and get some help. And us lads, for instance, we love to fucking hide from a tough convo or from a bloody counsellor because we might look weak or all this shit. But I think slowly that stuff's going. But if you've got things that you need to process and you need some help getting over grief and things, then search out a good grief counsellor or find somebody that's gone and done it and find out what they learnt from it and see what you could get from it too, because much like me carrying around the burden of a mortgage, we don't want to be carrying around the burden of death and things like that too, because surely the people that pass away from our lives, they wouldn't want us to be carrying those burdens as well. So tidy up some of those things if you need to, and don't overthink them. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's always tough, and I'm just absolutely dreading going through. Well, not absolutely dreading, but to know that you have to go through more of that because you've got more parents, and it sort of starts, I guess, with your grandparents passing away, and then it all sort of starts to become a bit real, and people might lose somebody in their earlier life, or earlier in their life, like in terms of a friend and stuff, and I think that's when you start to realise, like, fuck, the world actually works like this, and it doesn't all last forever, but we have to try and come to peace with it as we go so that we don't get impacted too massively and end up, harming ourselves in terms of the way we're looking at things and being scared to do things and not wanting to take risks and getting just trapped by all these different feelings and thoughts. Righto, I better let you go because we keep ranting about that one forever, but there's something there for you, I'm sure of it, and I would, I'll better go back to I've got 4 messages on the old Instagram, whoopsies. These might be people saying, geez, mate, you need to tone it down, but I'll let you go, and we will see you tomorrow as we climb into day number 27 of March.